Alright, guys, hope everyone's well and welcome back to the Improvement Podcast. So, in this episode, I'm going to touch on training while travelling, just with obviously being on holiday relatively recently, getting back round about a month ago today. I've That kind of sparked my imagination in regards to creating an episode in terms of how to handle training while you're away on holiday if you want to, let's say, carry the momentum going of your current training and just go over some potential options and what to expect if you are taking a week of training or what to do in terms of if you are training well on holiday. So, in terms of if you need to train on holiday, so if you take, let's say, a week off, even 2 weeks, you'll be completely fine in regards to you're not going to lose any muscle tissue. So, maybe sometime over 2 weeks, you could argue you might get some slight muscle loss. The saying, if you don't use it, you lose it, does apply. And a good example of this is when people, let's say, break their arm, break their leg, and they have it in a cast and they don't move it, they often have quite a lot of deterioration in the muscle just because they've not used that muscle group. However, just with doing any general activity, you're going to keep your muscle mass. And with taking a week or two off, you're not going to go backwards. You'll be fine. It's nothing to overly stress about. You might find when you get back, you don't get straight back to progressing your lifts. It might take a week of maybe matching your lifts or performing very, very slightly poorer just from not being used to the movement patterns. As when we perform movements weekly, we get efficient at them, we get used to performing them, which means we are skilled at the exercise and we can express a greater level of strength, meaning we're simply stronger when we perform them. So you don't need to train while you're away, and it's not something that you feel like you should do or you should really stress about an awful lot. It can even kind of have value taking time off, which I'll get to. But for myself, when I'm on holiday, I typically like continuing to train just because it's an enjoyable part of my day. I do it because I enjoy it. I don't do it because I need to. Hence why I still train when on holiday. And to be fair, I do struggle to switch off if I am being honest. So yeah, it's up to you if you want to train or not. You're not going to lose all your progress, or it's not going to be an absolute game changer if you train while you're on holiday. But I'll go into obviously the pros and cons of each and how to approach doing so. So if you are, let's say, wanting to keep the momentum going with your training, you don't feel like it's going to take away from the quality of your holiday. So that's something to consider is you're on holiday to make memories, enjoy yourself, experience different cultures, that sort of thing, and relax. So that should be taken into consideration. You don't want to stress yourself out and kind of not enjoy it due to thinking you need to be in your exact same routine as usual. So yeah, if you do want to train while you're away and it's not going to take away from the enjoyment or the enjoyment for others, then what you can maybe consider is when you are training while away is you could perform the same movement patterns. And what I mean by this is if in your normal training split you've usually got, let's say, a barbell row or like a deadlift variation, then just continue to perform that movement because it means you'll carry the momentum with your current training. As I touched on earlier, when we repeat movements regularly, we get efficient at the movement pattern. If, let's say, we have weeks where we don't perform the movement or we miss out a movement or we're swapping or change it or sorry, we're swapping our training regularly, we're not allowing ourselves to get efficient at movement patterns. We're not allowing ourselves to get accustomed with certain exercises. And as a result, you struggle to progress them. You struggle to express your true strength because every time you do it, you're just kind of getting used to the movement. Whereas if you do it every week, it'll become like brushing your teeth. You'll be able to do it in an effective manner. It will feel really easy. You'll be really skilled at it. You'll know how to judge, let's say, depth or how to set up and execute the movement to perform well and get the most out of the target muscle. But if you're not doing it on a weekly basis, you won't have that ability. So if there is movements you're used to doing, then continue to do them. Continue to do a barbell row if you have access to a barbell. Continue to do, let's say, a squat if you usually do a squat. And it means you can then, when you get back from your holiday, try and keep, let's say, the momentum going with your current training so that you can keep progressing. And it's not like it will be like you've not really took a break. And in terms of what else you can consider as well is just condensing the sessions. So although uh, like I enjoy the gym, like I don't want to, when I'm on holiday with my girlfriend, I'm not wanting to be on holiday for like 2 hours, which is round about how long my sessions are, or maybe even like 3 hours, which is how long back and hamstring session is, including obviously getting to the gym and back. That's gonna take away from the holiday potentially. So like, don't feel like you need to do the exact same session, exact same exercise order, and the exact same length. Most of the time, obviously it depends where you are on holiday. If it's more of a work trip, you're traveling for work, then you might have access to a not bad gym, or if it's somewhere abroad, you might not have access to a great gym. But if you do have access to a lot of kit, still you can condense your sessions, and what that will basically allow you to do is again drop fatigue. So when we train, we get physical and mental tiredness, which is basically can harm our ability to enjoy training, our motivation to train, our energy levels, and our ability to perform. So, not that fatigue's the enemy, but we accumulate fatigue, which can be detrimental in large amounts. So, when we're in that state, it is good to, let's say, drop fatigue now and then, which can be done by just doing less. And like just kind of like reducing how much you're doing in the gym can be a not bad idea. So you don't have to, let's say, replicate your entire session. You can, let's say, do a bit less so that you can be in and out the gym a bit faster, go through the session in a bit of a faster pace. Because again, the part you didn't go on a holiday to maximize your training and have a productive week of training. You went on holiday probably to sightsee, to enjoy yourself, to have a mental break. So treat it as one, as much as you want to keep your progression's going. If you're on holiday, then don't feel like you need to do the exact same session length as usual. And what you can also do to condense your session is use high intensity techniques. So things like drop sets, which is doing a set, dropping the weight and repeating that, or supersets, doing one exercise straight into the other, or rest pause sets, which is when you do a set to failure, or just do a set, rest 20 seconds, you do the set again, and then you repeat that, which basically allows you, all those things allow you to, there's some potential other benefit to them, but mainly just accumulate effective reps. Effective reps being reps that promote muscle growth and cause muscle growth. So yeah, when you're away, don't feel like you can't condense the session. You need to have them the normal length, and use the period wisely. It's like, obviously you can still train if you want to, but I think you're better to, like, using this period as a time to drop fatigue, potentially deload slightly instead of, let's say, keep hammering your training as you are. So what I'd look to do is maybe even consider, again, maybe doing less, and maybe doing, let's say, like usually when I deload, not like I don't wait a certain time and then deload automatically, but if I feel the need to deload, I will do, which means basically reduce what I'm doing in regards to the gym to drop fatigue. So reducing training volume. So typically I do one working set per exercise to failure, but no forced reps, just so I'm dropping the fatigue I've accumulated for training. So that's what I'd look to do maybe on holiday, use that period as a time to deload and not do as much. And in terms of like why that's a good time to do so is, again, you're not in your normal training environment, you've not got access to the kit you usually use, gym's probably not as good, so the time is better spent kind of dropping fatigue. That's going to be like a better use of my time than trying to maximize that week of training. So when you are, let's say, on holiday, the equipment's different, you've not got access to as much kit. What I'd say is, when you're picking movements, aim for ones that are in a stable environment. If, let's say, you have to do a movement you're not used to. And what I mean by this is, if, let's say, the only movements you've got access to for your, let's say, your chest, you've got, let's say, a dumbbell press or a chest press machine. Let's say you usually use neither of them, you don't use either of those back home. Then what I'd do is I would pick that chest press instead of a dumbbell press. The reason being is, when we think about like a dumbbell press requires quite a lot of stability, meaning it's hard to balance. It requires a bit more skill requirement than a chest press, and you'll probably get less out of the dumbbell press and the chest press. And the reason being is, it takes time getting that skill to get used to the movement. Whereas a chest press, it still requires skill. It still requires a thought process when setting up and executing the movement. But with a chest press, it is like your setup matters. How you perform the movement still matters, of course, but it will be easier to get the hang of the movement. It'll be easier to get a lot out of your chest if you're using it a one-off time. Because if, let's say, you use dumbbells after not using them for ages, you'll find it hard to probably stabilize them and balance them. You'll probably struggle to do so, and as a result, you won't get a lot out of that movement. So I'd rather see someone instead use use a chest press instead of like a movement that requires a bit more stability. And if you are, let's say, training away and you're not, let's say, going to do, let's say you usually train 5 days a week, you might train slightly less than that, especially if you're traveling, then that is something to consider, because when we're traveling, sleep's a bit poorer, your hydration's poorer, nutrition's poorer. So you're probably going to not be in the best position ever to perform, and you won't be recovering as well. You'll probably have like a bit more stress at the airport on the way there and the way back. So you probably won't be able to recover as well. So it makes sense, again, to kind of like drop fatigue to do a bit less total sessions. So what I'd say is, if you are going in the gym and you want to kind of like maintain where you're at, maybe progress slightly, I wouldn't really recommend spending that time, unless you only have 10 kilo dumbbells, doing an arm day. The reason being is, if you're training 3 times a week, your time's better spent doing, let's say, an upper lower split, because you're going to get a lot more bang for your buck from that. We're going to get a lot more stimulus and be able to train your body, your whole body, every single muscle, 1 times a week minimum, and you'll get more from that. It's a more time efficient way to train, because if you think about it, if, let's say, you're on holiday and you're training, let's say you train single body parts, let's say you have an arm day, and then let's say a quad day, and then let's say a shoulder day. You're only training three of your body parts in that week. Whereas if you train upper, lower, upper, you're training your upper body twice, your lower body once, which is going to give you more reward for your time. So when you are, let's say, training less frequently, and even when you're back home, you're in your usual training routine, when you're training less frequently, it's a good idea to kind of train a bit more bang for your buck sessions where you're training a bit more muscle groups at once, because you can recover from it as well, because you're training less throughout that week as a whole. If, let's say, you're doing let's say 6 sessions a week, you might struggle to recover from upper lower, upper lower, upper lower. But if you're only training 3 times a week, then you'll definitely be fine doing so. And something else I'd consider is, when you're away, what you can maybe do is just be a bit more sensible. Like, if you are traveling, you're sitting on a plane for hours on end, you're probably going to have a tight back. Your hydration's probably going to be a bit off. When you're traveling, when you're away, you're out your usual routine, different food, salt intake, that sort of thing. So your injury risk could be slightly higher. You're not used to maybe the equipment you're using or the barbell you're using, so you could find injury risk is slightly higher. So it's a good idea just to be sensible. For example, when I went away, my lower back felt a bit battered from obviously traveling. The day after, I wasn't going to go in and shove 10 kilograms on my previous week's lift on a bent over row. So instead, what I basically done was I done a paused variation of a bent over row, just to reduce load exposure. Again, when we are away, part of what we're trying to do is mitigate fatigue and kind of like deload. Treat this as a time to reset and be fresh for another run of training. So part of that is working in higher rep ranges, reducing load exposure, so you've got less stress on your connective tissues, so that you're nice and fresh again for when you get home. So part in doing so is just making sure you're maybe working in higher rep ranges, or pausing movements where you feel value in doing so, just so you're not battering your joints. Because when you think about a deload, when we're deloading or when we're on holiday, that's not the time where we're building maximum amounts of muscle, sorry. So it makes sense using that time to drop fatigue, make sure joints are nice and fresh from returning. The last thing that's going to be great for you to progress is having a sore elbow or sore back, or your knee feeling sore when you get back into normal training when you're back home. And in terms of, like, if you are not wanting to train on holiday, again, it's completely fine. So it is optional. You're not going to lose any progress, any gains. Nothing really bad is going to happen in regards to if you don't train when you're on holiday. So bear that in mind, and don't feel like you're going to step backwards or that, because again, it's a good opportunity to potentially drop fatigue. And if you know you're going on holiday, then what I do is just try and get a session in before. So it means, instead of, let's say, missing 5 sessions, you're missing 4. And again, it's not like you're going to lose all your progress if you do miss 5. But if you want to, let's say, still be able to get a session in, then try and get one in before you go, instead of, let's say, making that a rest day if it was going to be a rest day. And then you'll probably be a bit battered and you'll want that time off a bit more. And yeah, so when we're thinking about the holiday, like I said, don't try and maximize this week in terms of your progress, because you're not going to maximize progress. You're doing movements you're not used to, an environment you're not used to, your nutrition's probably not bang on. So don't treat it as such. Treat it as a mental break, a time to relax and focus on enjoying your holiday, which is why you're probably there. And make sure when you're doing it, you are working appropriate rep ranges that hopefully put you in a good spot for a return to training back home. You're not going to cause any excessive joint stress or niggles, so keep it on the safe side. If you are training less frequently, make it like upper body, lower body sessions or full body sessions, so you are getting a lot out of them. Or if, let's say, you're on a push-pull leg split, instead of doing, let's say, push-pull legs, or push-pull legs upper lower, you could just do the push, pull, and then the legs. That could be potentially a good idea. And again, if you can replicate movements, go for it. But if you can't, that's completely fine. Just, again, do other movements. And again, something else to consider is usually most people, I recommend doing so anyway, sticking to like a similar gym when you're back home, training in the same gym. And when you're on holiday, it's refreshing. It's nice having a change of environment. So if there's nice machines, or if you just don't want to do your usual exercises, then you don't need to do so. You kind of like use this week for your advantage. Make the most of this week. When you're in situations, you can either find the good in them or find the bad in them. If you focus on it's going to be a rubbish week of training, I'm not back home, the equipment's rubbish, you're going to have a bad week. Whereas if you focus on, right, I've got a time to enjoy myself, get a good pump, do exercises I'm not used to that I think are fun, and just enjoy yourself, you'll get a great mental break in terms of training. You'll be ready to attack when you're going back, and you'll enjoy training, which is why we ultimately do it. So don't feel like you need to do your exact program. It's like, enjoy yourself, you know what I mean? Get a pump, superset, drop sets, things like that. Just ultimately what we're on holiday for is to enjoy yourself. So yeah, but if again you don't want to train, you don't have to. You might think, why are you making an episode on training while traveling? What's the point? You don't need to. But I know you don't need to. I've said that at the start. It's if you want to, and if you want, let's say, a bit of guidance on how to approach it. But it is nothing to stress about at all. Even if, let's say, you take 0 sessions off and you've not got a massive focus on your nutrition, then you won't really go backwards much. Obviously, if you're eating or you could say if you're being very, very, very relaxed with your training, I'm not going to say you're not going to gain body fat, because you probably will. It's about how you handle it. You can still eat food, enjoy yourself in moderation, and then come back, but just be mindful of, obviously, keeping in good habits when you're away if you want to handle things well with the nutrition side of things. But thank you very much in regards to listening. Any questions or episodes you'd like to see, please let me know. And if you did enjoy it, share it on your story, tag me so I can give you a personal thank you. So thank you very much in regards to listening.